Many of you are old friends, and you remember, now it was almost 10 years ago, when my parents were at the end of their lives. And even though they lived in Southern California, a great deal of the responsibility for taking care of them fell to me. Fortunately, there were other people, and they eventually went to live in a place where they had a full-time staff. I felt the obligation of a daughter, natural obligation, to help them. I could offer them almost nothing of what my life is really all about because they simply weren't interested in any way. I remember a friend of mine saying once, "Oh, your parents must be so proud of you." I said, "My family is Jewish." There's really not a place in their mindset for what I'm doing. And in fact, over the 30-some years that I was part of Ananda while they were still living, we alternated between whether they favored it or didn't favor it. And it was entertaining but not relevant because my mind was entirely made up. But I had the thought, perhaps I could help them at the end of their life. My entire conversation about death with my mother went like this: "What do you think about death, Mom?" Her response, "Oh, I hate to think of all this going on and my not being here to enjoy it." I said, "Oh, okay." And that was the beginning and the end of it. With my father, I once tried to encourage him in a more expanded way of thinking, and he wasn't taking any of it. And I said, "Dad, don't you want to just keep growing?" And he looked at me with horror. "No," he said, just like that. I'm just essentially, I don't know what the words were, but it was, I'm just hanging on to the end now. I'm not thinking about getting any bigger. And there was a little bit of poignancy in that one. But nonetheless, I said, "Oh, why would I be trying to impose on them something they don't want?" Which is my philosophy, my way of life, my understanding, 1,000 things. And yet, toward the very end, my mother said to me, she had Parkinson's, she was struggling. "I don't know," she said in this funny way, "I don't know. Somehow I just feel better when you're around." And then she kind of looked at the ground and said, "It probably has something to do with what you're doing," like that. What I want to talk about is consciousness. Because there was nothing else that my mother was feeling. Absolutely nothing. We talked about food and movies and television shows, and we went shopping. We just never talked about anything. But she felt consciousness. Somehow she could tell that I was bringing into the house something that wasn't there when I wasn't there. And it was much more than just the fact that I was her daughter, because it wasn't that significant a relationship. But something came into the house when I came into the house. And it was the masters on the altar. It was a lifetime of sadhana. It was an understanding that we think it's all about the words and whether other people are listening and if they agree with us or not. And we're so caught up on the details. But all of the real exchange happens on a vibrational level. That's why when Jesus was just an infant, as Master was saying, what David read earlier, the full Christ consciousness manifested even through that tiny body. It's a fascinating thing to contemplate, not only in the example of a master, but in all small people whose bodies are small. Swami Kriyananda, as he put it, their entire intelligence is present. Babies are not at all stupid. They just don't have language and they don't have experience. But the full spectrum of their awareness is present as a vibration. And we all know that. We just don't quite know how to put it into words because we're so used to defining things in terms of intelligence and knowledge and language that we forget about consciousness. So the baby, Jesus, was a fully self-realized master. That's why on Christmas Eve, and as our evening progresses, you'll see, we really celebrate the birth of the baby. And we celebrate it in two ways. One is it's the birth of the consciousness. It's the birth within us of that divine potential for self-realization that we want to be constantly thinking about. It's so easy in this world, with all the distractions and all the seemingly tremendous importance put on things that don't matter at all, to just lose track of the only reason we're here, the only purpose for our incarnation, and really the only thing we'll take with us. The only thing we take with us is our consciousness. Ronnie, I'm going to have to ask you to stop because the movement is distracting me. Thank you very much. The only thing we'll take with us is our consciousness. At the end of life, no matter how hard we try, no matter how tightly we cling, everything about this life just evaporates. But we don't evaporate. Because when that baby is born again, everything about us is in that form and begins to manifest immediately. So when Christmas comes, and we have this opportunity to experience the bhav of loving a baby and the bhav of being loved by a baby, it reminds us again of that unlimited potential, which is our own true nature. The greatest enemy of everyday life is discouragement. When my father told me that he wasn't interested in growing anymore, I know it was because he was a little discouraged. My mother had become ill. Things hadn't quite worked out exactly as he'd hoped. My own name, Asha, means hope. I was so happy when Swami Kriyananda gave me that name. It wasn't given to me by my mother. It was given to me by my teacher. I loved it for its absolute simplicity. And also because as long as you have Asha, you have everything. Because as long as you have hope, then you will begin again. No matter how bad today was, no matter how discouraged you may be about everything that you want to be discouraged about, as long as there's hope, then we try again. And the entire birth of Jesus really can be just defined in that word hope. The good news, they called it. But what constitutes good news? That's what the word gospel means. It's God's news. It's the good news. And the good news is self-realization is our inevitable destiny. And those who have walked this path before us come back and take us by the hand and lead us through the way that they know. That's when Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the light. I have walked this way before you, and if you take my hand, we can walk it forward together. And ever and again, through the awakened sons and daughters, the divine light comes, and it illuminates the path for us. And all that we're trying to do at all times, we speak of Jesus, the figure who was born, the man who was born as a baby, that's what we're celebrating. But we say, may the light of Christ, the infinite consciousness, shine upon you. Because we come back to that word, consciousness. Because consciousness is us. If you reduce yourself down to your absolute irreducible minimum, that's what you come out to. You come out to consciousness. Your body can be reduced to nothing but the trunk and the head. You can be just this big, you can be a tiny baby, but the consciousness is always there. When all other options are taken away from you in the approachment of death, if your body dies slowly, what you have still is your consciousness. If you are imprisoned, What you have is your consciousness. And the infinite consciousness of Christ, you see, is our real potential. Jesus manifested it through that particular life. He had the relationship with Joseph and Mary. He had the relationship with John the Baptist. He had to carry out that powerful mission to the Jewish people to whom he had been sent as the avatar. He had to fight against a corrupt priesthood. He had to stand against a Roman oppressor. He had to gather his disciples. He had to give his teaching. He had so many powerful things to do. But the only reason we remember all those things is because through it all there was this consciousness of infinity. And the reason people followed him was because, I don't know, somehow I just feel better when I'm with you. Right? Each of us in our own tiny way, we turn back to the ones who are walking behind us, and we turn forward to the ones who are walking in front of us. And in this way we all, every living creature, even animals and everyone, we're all just moving in this really just beautiful river of light. I was born in the town of El Paso, Texas, about which I can say very little positive, except this, because of the Mexican influence there. Every Christmas, people would decorate with what we call luminarios, which just means lights, of course. But it was paper bags, just plain paper bags with a few inches of sand and a candle set in them. And they would be placed down the sidewalks and on the edges of the houses and always, and then all the lights would go out. And you would see, even from a distance, you would see these winding paths of light. And I had no spiritual context, no conscious spiritual context. As a child, I was in my late teens before I found self-realization. But I was so entranced by what looked to me like a pathway of light that was so clearly going somewhere. And we know, even if we don't know in words, we know, because our full consciousness is there. I knew that those lights were taking me somewhere. And that was somewhere that I profoundly and deeply wanted to go. Because we know. We pass our time doing all these things. What will I do today? What will I buy? Who will I talk to? Where will I play? Where will my pleasure come from? How much money can I make today? All of these different things that we do. But we know. Deep in our hearts, there's something that we're looking for. And then we come across something, and something about it, whether it's music, whether it's a book, whether it's a divine memory, whether it's just a touch of that consciousness, it comes through. It comes into us somehow. And as soon as we have it, we know, this is it. This is what I'm looking for. And sometimes it's huge, just life-shattering, life-shifting. But just as often it's so small. I was walking up the stairs in my own house one day, and it crossed my mind, what would it be like to live without any fear? What if I was afraid of nothing? And just for a moment, just because of that little prayer, there was a moment of pure fearlessness, between the second and third step. Just like that. Consciousness. It's all consciousness. So we play out, as we're going to, as this evening unfolds, we play out the grandeur of the story of this night. And we do it like children. This whole celebration of the birth of Jesus in the form of a living creche was actually created by St. Francis of Assisi, because he wanted to give his monks and he wanted to give his nuns a way to escape from all the confining concerns that we always have, and to enter wholeheartedly into another world. And that's the world in which the Christ child is the only reality. All of the songs about Jesus, about adoring Jesus, about giving Jesus our heart. We become so cynical these days about these things. But suffer little children to come unto me, for as such is the kingdom of heaven. That's what Jesus himself said. Why did he say that? Because the children are unencumbered. Their whole intelligence and consciousness is present, but they're unencumbered by all the things that bother us. It's a wonderful story I've told you, some of you before, of one of Yogananda's relatives, his niece. Yogananda lived most of his life in America, went back to India for a little over a year. When he came back to India into his family home, this niece was 3 years old. She has no conscious memory of what happened when Yogananda visited, but all her family tells her. She was 3 years old. She fell in love with him as soon as he came in the door. And it never crossed her mind that he didn't adore her in the same way she adored him. And every time he'd come into the house, she would just run to him. She would grab his leg. She would insist on being held in his lap. And she would absolutely not put up with any other situation but that. Part of me thought, oh, what a shame to have wasted your 1 year of contact with your guru and to be 3 years old. And then I thought, what a great good karma to be only 3 years old. Because your full consciousness is there. Your full soul is there. Small body doesn't mean small anything else, but completely unencumbered. God is very simple. Swami Kriyananda has often reminded us of this. Because the world is so complicated, and people's egoic relationships are so complicated, and our necessity to do so many things is so complicated. We think, well, God is bigger than us, so he must be even more complicated. But that complication is because of the flux. Everything is always changing. Whereas God is the eternal unchanging. And think about it. The closer you come to the unchanging, you come into absolute simplicity. That's why Jesus spoke of little children. He was not sentimental. Some of those little children were horrible people, and he could see that. Bad people die, and they're little children. They're still bad people. They're just small. They don't have a chance yet, right? But what he really meant was unencumbered, simple. So take Christmas in its simplest form, and oddly enough, that'll take you into its most magnificent form. Just take it uncritically. How beautiful it is to sing these wonderful songs. How lovely it is that everybody gives presents to everyone else, and people go back to the places where they feel nurtured and loved, and recreate all of those intimate relationships. I was watching today just a little 3-minute pictures of one of our communities, and this couple was pictured there. Many of you know them, Maya Devi and Helmut. They've been together, they're my age, and they've been together since they were 18. They were just walking together, and the entire exquisite nature of noble human love was just exemplified in their consciousness. And I just began to cry. I couldn't stop crying. I'm looking at this beautiful Christmas thing and I'm crying. So beautiful. When noble consciousness is truly there, God-centered noble consciousness. Let us use Christmas as a way to start a whole new path in our life. Let us move unencumbered. Let us look at every situation and see in it that spark of divinity. Let us hold to our hearts this baby Jesus, just like a mother would hold a little child, Just the way Mary holds the baby Jesus, even if we don't have the actual baby in our hands, maybe if we've never even held a baby, what it would be like to just hold that wonderful baby in our arms and have nothing between us and the love we have to give, and nothing between us and the love he has to give us. As many as received him, Jesus said, to them gave he the power to become as he is. You know, he is our very own. This is the bliss of the baby. The baby is ours. May the light of Christ shine upon us, the infinite consciousness, now and for all time.